People of God, open your ears and awaken your spirit, for what I'm about to speak is not soft bread, but meat for the mature, truth for the discerning, revelation for the remnant. We ask, why does God not destroy Satan? Why does he allow the fallen ones to walk among the sons of men, to tempt, to twist, to accuse? And the answer is as deep as the foundations of the heavens. God's justice operates by eternal laws. Before the foundation of the world, before there was a sun to rise or a moon to reflect, before the first star sang its note into the symphony of creation, not the justice of men, which is swayed by emotion or convenience or power, but the justice of God. Pure, unwavering, unbending. This justice is not a tool God uses. It is a part of who he is. He does not step outside of it. He does not override it. He is not above it. It flows from his very nature. And because he does not change, neither does his justice. We ask, if God is all-powerful, why doesn't he simply destroy Satan and end the war? But that question misses the weight of divine law. The power of God is not in question. He spoke the cosmos into existence. He commands winds and waves, galaxies and angels. But the question is not about power. It is about righteousness. God cannot act unjustly, not even toward the unjust. If he did, he would cease to be who he is. He cannot contradict himself. His justice does not allow for shortcuts. It demands full truth, full accounting, full revelation. The fallen angels, including Satan, were not made as disposable creatures. They were created in glory, in light, in the courts of heaven. Their rebellion was not a surprise to God, but it was still real. It was not coerced or preordained as a script they were forced to follow. It was chosen, and with that choice came consequences. But eternal beings are not subject to the same decay as flesh. Their judgment is not instant, because their nature is not temporal. God is not hasty in justice. He is deliberate. His courtroom does not operate like ours, where men cry out for vengeance and demand immediate satisfaction. His judgments are perfect. They are holy. They are complete. To destroy Satan outside the boundaries of divine law would be to bypass the very thing that separates God from chaos. Order. To remove a being simply because he is evil, without fulfilling the requirements of justice, would set a precedent that undermines the entire structure of God's moral universe. God's justice must be seen to be righteous, not just by us, but by all creation, by angels, by principalities, by powers. Every mouth must be silenced, and every knee must bow, not out of forced fear, but out of the revealed glory of perfect judgment. This is why Satan remains, not because he is equal to God, not because God cannot remove him, but because the law of righteousness requires a process, a trial, a verdict, and a sentence. That sentence will come, but not before every charge is answered, every witness is heard, every truth brought to light. Satan will not be erased. He will be condemned. And condemnation must follow the rules of heaven's court. Even in human justice, a judge does not sentence before the crime is proven, before the witnesses testify, before the evidence is laid bare. How much more with God? He allows evil to run its course not because he condones it, but because he exposes it. The presence of the accuser serves the process of judgment. God is not slow, as some count slowness, but he is patient. His patience is not weakness. It is wisdom. It is sovereignty. It is the power to hold back power until the appointed time. And so, God does not kill Satan because divine justice is not a matter of destruction. It is a matter of revelation. Satan must be revealed as he is. His works must be made plain. The fruit of his rebellion must be visible to all. Only then can the full justice of God be executed. Not in the shadows, not in secret, but before all thrones and dominions. In the fullness of time, when every purpose has been fulfilled, when every soul has made its choice, when every prophecy is spoken, then will come the moment, not of annihilation, but of judgment. Until then, the justice of God holds. It does not falter. It does not forget. It waits. In that waiting, we see not weakness, but the strength of a holy God who will not compromise even to silence his greatest enemy. God created the angels with will, not machinery. He crafted them not as winds that must blow only one way, but as spirits capable of choosing their path. The mystery of free will did not begin with Adam in the garden. It began in the heavenlies, in realms of glory, where no sin yet existed, where every being was cloaked in light. Lucifer, son of the morning, walked among the stones of fire. He was not born in rebellion. He was born in splendor. But he chose. That is the mystery. Choice in a world where none should have chosen evil, and yet one did. God, being sovereign, did not make creation to be bound by strings. He did not fashion puppets. He made beings in his image, not just in form, but in freedom. With that freedom came the potential for both worship and rebellion. The same will that allows love to be genuine also allows betrayal to be real. Satan, the adversary, exercised that will. He rose not because he was ordained to, but because he desired to. He looked upon the throne and said, I will ascend. And when he said, I will, he crossed the line from obedience to defiance. It was the first war of wills, and it happened not on earth but in heaven. God's allowance of Satan's rebellion was not an oversight, nor was it weakness. It was restraint to create restraint. Oh, it's divine restraint. The power of God is infinite. In one breath, he could unmake the adversary. In one word, he could dissolve all resistance. But he did not. He held back, not because he lacked power, but because he possessed wisdom. There is a strength greater than force. It is the strength to withhold force when the timing is not right. God restrains himself not for Satan's sake, but for ours, for the sake of the plan, the process, and the promise. Free will cannot be revoked the moment it is misused, or it ceases to be free will. If God gave the angels choice, he must honor that gift. And if he gave man choice, he must allow the consequences to unfold. The rebellion of Satan was not the failure of God's plan. It was the testing ground for its triumph. God allows the will of darkness to be expressed, not because he approves, but because he answers it with something greater, the will of redemption. He allows the enemy to move, only so he may move in response with glory. God does not fear the choices of his creation. He does not panic at the presence of evil. He does not scramble to regain control. His throne is not shaken by rebellion. It stands precisely because he allows rebellion without compromising his sovereignty. Satan's freedom to act is not a threat. It is a testimony to a deeper truth, that God's dominion does not require the absence of resistance. It reigns even when darkness is permitted to speak. There is a divine patience in this, patience that bears long with evil, not because evil is strong, but because God is sure. He is sure of his plan. He is sure of his Son. He is sure of the cross. He is sure that what begins in darkness will end in light. The restraint of God is not an absence. It is a stage, a platform upon which he will unfold the fullness of his justice and his mercy. In the garden, the serpent whispered because he was allowed to whisper. Tempter was permitted into paradise, not because God was absent, but because choice had to be real. And choice cannot be real if there is only one voice. So God allowed a second voice, a second option, a second path, not to trap man, but to reveal man, and through that revelation, to reveal himself. Even now, in this age, the fallen ones are not locked away. Not yet. They are active not because they are victorious, but because their time serves a purpose. Every temptation, every lie, every attack, all of it plays into the grand narrative. It proves the heart of man. It proves the faithfulness of God. It proves the power of redemption. If God had silenced the enemy before the story began, we would never know the depth of the deliverer. The will of Satan is real, but it is not supreme. It moves within the boundaries set by a higher will, a sovereign will. A will that allows rebellion for a moment, in order to establish righteousness forever. The mystery is not that God allows evil, but that he uses it to reveal good. He permits the enemy's hand so he can reveal his own. And in the end, every free choice, angelic or human, will be brought into the courtroom of eternity, where every knee shall bow and every will must reckon with the will of the one who never changed. Satan's existence in the narrative of creation is not a disruption that God failed to prevent. It is a thread woven into the tapestry of redemption. The adversary does not stand outside of God's plan, but unknowingly serves it. Not by obedience, for he obeys nothing but his own pride, but by opposition, by resistance, by attempting to thwart what he can never overcome. He is the enemy, but in God's sovereignty, even the enemy becomes a tool for revealing glory. From the beginning, the serpent was permitted in the garden. That alone speaks volumes. The holy ground of Eden, untouched and unspoiled, was not guarded from his presence. God allowed him entry, not because he lacked the power to prevent it, but because he possessed the wisdom to use it. In the presence of the serpent, Adam and Eve were not abandoned. They were given the chance to choose. A perfect world with no test is a paradise without purpose. Without the option to turn away, there is no meaning in choosing to remain. The temptation was not the failure of the plan. It was the proving of it. The fall did not take God by surprise. It activated the promise that was older than the world itself. For the Lamb was slain before the foundation of the world. The cross was not a backup plan. It was the plan. And Satan's role, though filled with hatred and pride, was to press the button that would launch the greatest act of love the universe has ever seen. When Satan entered Judas, when he plotted the death of the Messiah, when he stirred the hatred of religious men and the cowardice of Roman rulers, he thought he was winning. He thought he had overturned the very Son of God. But he did not know that by lifting Jesus up, he was setting the stage for his own defeat. The cross intended by the enemy to be the symbol of humiliation became the weapon of eternal triumph. That which Satan used to kill became the instrument of life. That which he used to curse became the altar of blessing. The grave he rolled into place became the door through which resurrection entered the world. This is the mystery of God's sovereignty over evil. The enemy plots, but God repurposes. The enemy strikes, but God transforms the wound into a wellspring. Every time Satan moves, he advances the purposes of the very God he despises. It is not because he wants to, it is because he cannot help it. He is trapped in a system he cannot escape. A system where every attack against the righteous becomes their refining. Every accusation becomes a testimony. Every trial becomes a pathway to glory. Job was tested by the devil, but it was God who allowed the test, not to destroy Job, but to reveal him. And in revealing Job, to reveal himself. To show that there is faith deeper than blessings, worship that does not depend on reward, loyalty that cannot be shaken by loss. Pharaoh hardened his heart, but God used that hardness to magnify his own name across the earth. Saul sought to kill David, but in that pursuit, David was prepared for the throne. The storm was sent against the disciples, but in the storm, they saw Jesus walk on water. Over and over, what the enemy meant for evil, God turned for good, not by erasing the evil, but by overwhelming it with a greater purpose. Satan's resistance sharpens the sword of the saints. His temptations awaken their vigilance. His accusations drive them to the throne of grace. His threats make them remember who truly holds power. Satan, in his rebellion, thought he could rewrite the story. But he only revealed the author. He thought he could corrupt creation, but all he did was set the stage for recreation. He thought he could bind men in sin, but his chains were broken by a man on a cross who said, "It is finished." And so, though Satan acts as an enemy, he cannot escape the hand of God that turns every move into another step toward fulfillment. He is allowed to run, but only within boundaries. He is allowed to speak, but only for a time. His role is temporary, his influence limited, his end certain. Even now, when darkness increases, when the lies grow louder, when the world shakes under the weight of deception, it only serves to set the stage for something greater. It reveals the contrast. It magnifies the light. The wheat and the tares grow together not by mistake, but by design. For the harvest is coming, and everything must be seen for what it is. The enemy, in trying to destroy the plan, ensures its unfolding. He cannot help but fulfill prophecy. He cannot escape the story he despises, and every time he acts, he confirms that the plan of redemption is not only intact, it is advancing. The end of Satan is not erasure, it is judgment. God does not wipe away his enemies like a man sweeping dust under a rug. He brings them to justice in full view of heaven and earth. The destruction of evil is not through disappearance, but through exposure. Every lie must be unveiled. Every scheme must be seen. Every motive laid bare. The end of the adversary is not instant annihilation, but a verdict rendered before all creation. God does not defeat darkness by pretending it never existed. He defeats it by dragging it into the light and revealing it for what it truly is. The serpent is not crushed in secret, but judged in glory. There is a difference between erasing and overcoming. Erasing is easy. It is what man does when he cannot handle conflict. But God is not afraid of conflict. He is not intimidated by evil. He confronts it, engages it, and triumphs over it. That is why Satan remains, not because God cannot remove him, but because God is writing a story in which evil is not simply destroyed, but judged, tried, and condemned. A story where righteousness does not hide from darkness, but overcomes it. but overcomes it. In the final judgment, the devil is cast into the lake of fire. That fire is not symbolic. It is not a metaphor. It is the place of eternal sentence created not for man, but for the devil and his angels. The fact that this place exists tells us that Satan is not to be deleted, but to be held accountable. His rebellion will not be forgotten. It will be punished forever. Justice does not end with deletion. It ends with the sentence fitting the crime. The lake of fire is not just a place of torment, but a place of testimony. It declares to all creation that God is not mocked, that rebellion has consequences, and that righteousness will prevail. The cross was not the end of Satan, but it was the beginning of his defeat. When Christ died and rose, he disarmed the powers and principalities. He made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them in the very act the enemy thought was his greatest victory. It was not force that conquered, it was sacrifice. It was not the sword that struck the fatal blow, it was the Lamb. This is the wisdom of God, that he defeats the highest evil not through overwhelming might, but through unyielding righteousness. God's method is always revelation. He allows evil to show its full face before he brings the final word. The enemy will be allowed to rise to his highest point, and then he will fall by the hand of justice. Babylon is not crushed in secret. It is exposed and burned in the sight of kings and nations. The beast and the false prophet are thrown into the lake of fire before every eye. The devil is not whisked away, but brought down. His defeat is not quiet. It is eternal and public and final. This is how God establishes truth, not through vanishing acts, but through verdicts. Even now, the people of God are learning not just to resist evil, but to overcome it with good, and not to destroy, but to endure and conquer. Victory in the kingdom is not about silencing opposition. It is about outlasting it. Satan's time is short, but God's justice is eternal. His accusations may rise, but they are met with intercession. His attacks may come, but they are met with endurance. And through this, the saints learn the nature of true power, and not in the absence of struggle, but in triumph through it. The enemy's fate is sealed, not by an act of rage, but by the decree of the righteous judge. The scrolls will be opened, the books will be read, and the adversary will be sentenced according to the fullness of his deeds. Not one lie will be forgotten, not one rebellion overlooked, not one moment of deception will escape the fire. Justice will be complete. It will not be swift for the sake of comfort. It will be perfect for the sake of truth. In this, the majesty of God is displayed, not just in his power to destroy, but in his commitment to make all things right. God's kingdom is not built on fear, but on righteousness, not on force, but on holiness. And so his enemies are not simply removed, they are overcome. Satan is not feared in the courts of heaven. He is known, measured, and already sentenced. And when that day comes, when the judge sits and the books are opened, there will be no negotiation, no appeal, no escape. The lake of fire will receive him, not as a mystery, but as a resolved case. Not because God needed to silence a rival, but because justice demanded that rebellion meet its rightful end. The endurance of Satan's presence in the world is not a testimony of his strength, but a revelation of God's purposes. It is not because Satan is too powerful to be stopped, nor because his rebellion has caught heaven off guard, but because his presence serves to separate the true from the false, the light from the darkness, the wheat from the tares. In a world without contrast, truth cannot be seen in its fullness. The presence of evil is the backdrop against which righteousness shines. And so, God does not eliminate the adversary in haste. He uses him to test, to refine, and to reveal. Throughout Scripture, the enemy is allowed access to places where we would expect him to be barred. He appears in the Garden of Eden, in the courts of heaven, even in the wilderness where the Son of God fasts and prays. Each time he is permitted. Each time God allows the confrontation. And in each confrontation, something is revealed. In Eden, man's failure is revealed. In the wilderness, the obedience of the second Adam is revealed. In the life of the believer, faith is revealed, not in calm, but in conflict. It is not the absence of the devil that proves a man's faith, but the endurance of that faith in the midst of temptation and trial. God does not raise up a church that is untouched by evil, but a church that stands in the midst of it. He does not call his people to a battlefield already cleared, but to one where the enemy prowls, attacks, and accuses. This is not because God delights in our struggle, but because struggle produces strength. The saints overcome not because there is no adversary, but because they have learned to stand. Satan remains so that we might be trained, like soldiers in a war whose victory has already been written, but whose courage must still be tested. There is a purpose in the tension, a holy design in the delay. The enemy has not been removed because the proving of the righteous is still unfolding. Last page has not yet been turned. The fire still refines. The fight still forges. The race still runs. And through it all, the church is being shaped, not into something fragile, but into something eternal. The enemy's presence is the grit against which the soul is sharpened. It is the valley in which the shepherd is revealed. It is the night in which the glory of the Lord becomes our only light. If God had removed Satan at the moment of his rebellion, we would never have seen the glory of the cross. If he had silenced the serpent in Eden, we would never have known the beauty of redemption. If he had destroyed the accuser before he entered the wilderness, we would never have witnessed the obedience of the Son. The presence of the enemy makes room for the revelation of the King. Magnifies the victory. It deepens the glory. It gives weight to the crown. Now, Satan is not permitted to act freely. He is on a leash held by the sovereign hand. Every move he makes, every scheme he unfolds, must pass through divine permission. He is the enemy, but he is still subject. He roams, but he does not rule. His rage is real, but it is restrained. Even now his time is limited, his scope confined, his works numbered. He rages not from victory, but from fear. He knows what many have forgotten, that his end has already been written, and his defeat has already begun. The endurance of Satan's presence is also a witness to the long-suffering of God. For God does not only allow the enemy to exist, he allows space for repentance, even in the hearts of those once deceived by him. The patience of God is not passivity, his purpose. He delays not because he is slow, but because he is merciful. And in that delay, people are saved, lives are changed, destinies are rewritten. The devil still roars, but God still redeems. This is the pattern of the age. Holy patience that permits evil only long enough to bring about the fullness of good. A divine restraint that allows darkness to rise so that light might be revealed in its brilliance. And though Satan schemes, plots, and deceives, he cannot outmaneuver the wisdom of God. Every attack only sets the stage for another unveiling of grace. Every temptation only makes room for a deeper testimony. Every storm only clears the skies for the appearing of the King. There is a courtroom in the heavenlies, a throne that is never shaken, and from it flows justice that cannot be corrupted. In that courtroom, the adversary still comes, not in power, but in accusation. He is called the accuser of the brethren, not because he holds truth, but because he twists it. He points the finger not out of righteousness, but out of hatred. Yet God does not silence him immediately. He permits the accusations to rise, not because they have authority, but because they serve a higher purpose. They reveal the power of intercession, the blood that speaks better things than that of Abel, the defense that stands eternal at the right hand of God. Satan cannot speak without being heard, but his voice is not the final word. He hurls accusations, but they are answered. He sows guilt, but grace rises higher. The court of heaven is not void of tension. It is where justice and mercy meet, where truth exposes sin and yet does not destroy the sinner. The accuser plays his part, not as a victor, but as a shadow against which the light of the advocate shines brighter. The presence of Satan in the courts of heaven is not a blemish on God's justice. It is a testimony of his design, that even in the highest places, freedom must face its own fruit. When Job was tested, it was not Satan's idea, it was God's challenge. It was God who said, "Have you considered my servant?" It was God who opened the door not to destroy Job, but to reveal him. Satan accused, but he could only go as far as the boundaries allowed. And when Job emerged from the storm, it was not Satan who was justified. It was God. The enemy's voice only sharpened the revelation of faith. His attacks only deepened the root of trust. He played his part, but in playing it, he served a greater glory. Not by willful obedience, but by failing to realize that even his rebellion must bend to the sovereign will. The fallen angels, like their master, were given will, and that will was their undoing. They did not fall by force. They fell by choice. And their judgment was not immediate, because their actions are part of a longer unfolding. Their freedom is not endorsement. It is indictment. The longer they act, the greater their guilt. The more they deceive, the more justice accumulates. God allows them not because he is blind, but because he is storing up a verdict that will be unshakable. Their judgment is not a sudden strike. It is a storm that has been gathering for ages. They are not left unpunished even now. Their chains are invisible, but they are real. Their freedom is limited. Their influence permitted only in shadows. The worst among them are already bound, waiting in darkness. The rest operate under restrictions they cannot break. They move, but never outside of sovereignty. Their reach is long, but it ends at the border of God's will. Even the demons that cried out in the Gospels knew this. Have you come to torment us before the time? They know there is an appointed hour. They know the sentence has already been spoken. And so they rage not in confidence, but in desperation. The patience of God with fallen beings is not tolerance. It is timing. The story is not yet finished. The final chapters are still being written, and every act of darkness, every deception, every strike against the people of God is being recorded for the final reckoning. Heaven is not unaware. The cries of the saints rise like incense, the blood of the martyrs cries from the ground, and every tear is stored. Justice sleeps for no one. It is awake, alert, and it moves with perfect precision. The enemy stands condemned, not just in the future, but already in the present. His doom was sealed at the cross. His sentence is written in eternity. But God allows the full case to be built, not because he needs more evidence, but because the universe will witness a justice so thorough, so complete, that none will question it. Every angel will see, every creature will know. And when the final judgment is pronounced, it will not be a surprise. It will be the culmination of a process that began long before time. This is why God does not destroy Satan now. Not because he cannot, but because the case must be finished. The courtroom must speak. The witnesses must testify. The scroll must be unsealed, and in the end, the accuser will be silenced, not by force alone, but by the overwhelming weight of truth.